Okay, I guess we're live. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Omakase Show webinar series. My name is Lola or Olana, and today we have an amazing guest. But before we dive into the webinar, I just wanted to remind you that you can always support us, and it is highly appreciated. If you go to our profile on X, which is the Omakase Show, you can see this button with cash on it, and you can send your donations in Ethereum. Again, really appreciate it. It makes our show better, and the production costs are just covered by these donations. And so today we have an amazing guest. Victor, thank you so much for joining us today. Just to give a brief introduction, Victor is kind of digital art pioneer. If I am correct, you've been practicing this medium since 1983 or 86. I don't remember correctly. Yeah.
Well, 83,
Okay.
83 I kind of dipped my feet in, but it was like 85 and 86 I really got going. It was a gradual transition from analog media into digital.
That is crazy. Like, I texted one of the founders of this show that we are having a person who was working with this medium since 1983, and he replied back to me and said something like, "How do you find this legend?" So yeah, thank you so much for joining. You're definitely a legend in this space. So yeah, just go ahead and tell us how you got in here, what do you do, and just a small introduction.
Yeah. So as you know, my name is Victor Acevedo. I always like to say that. So that's how I pronounce it, Acevedo. And well, I started as an analog media artist, actually. Um, Computer graphics or computer art did exist when I started, but I didn't know anything about it. And this was in the late 1970s. But where I go back, thinking about your question, how did my journey start? It really started when I was a child. You know, say I was drawing spontaneously at age 4. It just kind of happened naturally, and then I had an older brother who also had a talent for drawing, so we would draw together for hours and hours. So that was kind of like this seminal experience, a way of interfacing with the world graphically through drawing. But I kind of went dormant for many years, maybe because it was so natural and came easy. I didn't think, oh, I'm going to be an artist someday. Um, but I had those artistic leanings, and then I got into music for a while when I was a teenager, learning guitar and playing in bands. But really, after some years of that, I realized really my true talent is in the visual arts. So I had an epiphany in 1975. I was in Holland, in Amsterdam, and I went to the Van Gogh Museum. And I was up close to what I remember is like about 30 Van Gogh canvases. You could get really close. And the power of paint was just really awe-inspiring. I didn't realize how the physicality and materiality of the paint had so much energy. So that was kind of an epiphanous moment, and I thought, yeah, maybe I should pursue a career in the visual art. So that was in 75. I'll try to do this really quick, but then 76. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, but in 76, I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then a year later, I started taking college level art classes in art history and also studio classes. And so that was the beginning of it for me, sort of waking up into my reconnecting with my core self, and kind of reconnecting with how to be in the world with my true calling. But it was just slowly unlocking that talent. Then after about a couple of years, I moved back to Los Angeles and transferred to Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. And that's where I learned about computer graphics. I took a class with Gene Youngblood, the author of Expanded Cinema. It's a legendary book, came out in 1970. It's legendary in the film theory circles, but media circles as well. It was one of the first books that talked about computer graphics, talked about visual music as part of the heritage of film history. Anyway, that's kind of the seed of it. But just to wrap up this question or answer, I should say, it was in Youngblood's class that I got introduced to computer graphics and visual music, and Ed Emshwiller's piece, which is called Sudden Stone. You can still see it on YouTube. I highly recommend it, and it's also in a current museum show here in Los Angeles County, LACMA, Los Angeles County Museum of Art. They have a great survey show called Digital Witness, and they actually have a copy of Ed Emshwiller's Sunstone running on a monitor. So it was amazing to see it again in high fidelity, as it were, so many years later. But that was an epiphanous moment. That was a life-changing. Just seeing that one piece, I go, wow, that's the future. It's like moving painting. It's not video, it's something else. It was a synthesis of live action video and computer generated components. And so then I knew I wanted to get into computer art, or computer graphics as it was related to me at that juncture. And there was more there, but that kind of gives you a kind of a fast forward of how I got into the digital. And it wasn't available. One last thought on that: it wasn't available at that juncture, which was 1980. Taking that class, a survey, it wasn't at the beginning of the 1980s. There was very little access to digital art practice, like computer labs and such in colleges. You'd have to go to the engineering or science department, maybe get access to a mainframe. So there was a little bit, it was very sporadic. But by the middle 1980s and the end of the 80s, many colleges then had computer labs. So after I left Art Center, I had to find it. How do I get hands-on? It was a thing. And at the same time, PCs were coming out in the early 1980s. The personal computer was proliferating. And so that kind of switched on to that, became part of the desktop revolution in terms of finding my voice in the digital domain and finding a way to practice this work.
And so, yeah, you already kind of touch upon finding the voice, finding how you express, how you communicate through your art. So in general, I know you're inspired by geometrical forms and metaphysics. I'm a philosophy student, so I know what metaphysics is. However, if you were to explain this word to somebody who doesn't, how would you do it? I know it's tough one. I have no idea even how to communicate what metaphysics is, but maybe you have a better understanding of this term.
Yeah, well, metaphysics, you can think of the opposite word for a start as an avenue into getting a handle on the definition, like the physical, what we think of as concrete and real in our world, and then and physics, the properties of physics that have kind of scientifically tracked and codified mathematically, of properties of how physics work in the various disciplines and various phenomena. And meta is kind of like the above, the prefix that means, I believe it means kind of above uh, something. It's, or a large aspect of it. So metaphysics is that realm outside of regular physics. It still has a certain kind of trackable and rational logic to it on some level. Other levels are its paradox, inexplicable, outside the realm of regular logic. At the same time, I think most humans clue into it. It's real. It's very close to spirituality. It's on that spectrum, so the sense of the spirit, things that are not, things that are real, things are kind of like thought forms, things that are feelings, but things that are kind of at once very personal, but also universal for everybody, that we can kind of tune into. So that's kind of just off the cuff, a definition of physics. And then how it relates to my work is, I guess I kind of attracted by that. I have a sense of the metaphysical and the spiritual. So I want to express that in my work. I want to kind of make pictures of that
So
phenomena.
my,
Sorry.
yeah, got it. And Have you drew any? I'm sorry for my dogs. They're so crazy today. Um, do you draw any inspiration from philosophy and some particular philosophers? And in general, what inspired you also to experiment with geometrical forms?
Yeah. Um, Philosophy is sort of a kind of important part of what I do. Oh, okay, there's some images there. While you're here, before I jump into, I want to bring people's attention to the images you have on the screen now. And this is my analog work. As I was saying, I started analog. And the black and white image on the right, you can see this kind of line work. And that is an overlay of, oh, very good. You can zoom in, of this space frame. I'm kind of jumping ahead. I want to go back to your actual question in a moment, but I'm glad you're showing this, and we can kind of reference that later. But that's part of how I sort of um, made a picture about this phenomena, the phenomena of the field. But there were some readings I took in the questions that you sort of submitted to me. I made some notes so I could kind of like think about more. A deeper sort of answer to your many excellent questions. So I kind of went on this kind of like, you can kind of follow a chronology of my sort of spiritual and philosophical development as a young person, and as someone who wants to be an artist, a visual artist, and express those ideas. So I think one of the early awakenings was reading this book called Be Here Now by Ram Dass. It's a classic. Some of you in the audience may know it. In fact, let's see, do I have it? I don't have it handy, but I was going to hold it up and see if I can. Well, it's probably another room, so never mind. But there's a picture of a chair on it. I hadn't really made this connection before, but there on the cover, there's this chair, and then there's all this energy field around it, which is all very symmetrical and geometrical. And I thought, maybe that planted a seed for me later, years later, when I actually, say 5 years later, got into practicing visual art in college. Maybe that metaphor unconsciously came up again. But that overlay of a space frame on recognizable people and things and a scene were, for me, a great graphic metaphor to express the idea of this energy ocean that we're in. And I loved how I listened to your Krista Kim interview, and I had a great affinity for many things she was saying, like about this unified energy field that you can access through meditation. So that it's kind of like that. And then the other, taking another step, I don't know, forward or another step in a direction or so, you could do that while access that through perception is my feeling. If you look at the world in a certain way, you can kind of become aware of the energetic resonance of the moment, of the eternal now moment, even when you're waking. But meditation is a good door into that. And then later, towards the question about philosophy, in the 70s, in 75, I was reading the Carlos Castaneda books, which a book called A Separate Reality and a Journey to Ixtlan. And these were very popular at the time. And in some ways, Castaneda has been sort of debunked somewhat, as like they weren't really true stories, but they're very real and believable on a level of kind of a practical application of this called alternate reality ways of being and seeing. So I think they're still valid in a certain regard. Whether they're literally true or not is not as important. So the Castaneda book, and then later, The Tao of Physics by Fritjof Capra was very influential. And another book was, let's see if I have it here. Oh, I do have Be Here Now. This kind of old school holding books up, but there's that image. And because I didn't have the book for a long time, and I rebought it just recently after not seeing it for decades. And there's that energy field, kind of like this moment sitting in a chair. Maybe you might meditate in a chair like that. So there's that. And then the holographic paradigm was, even though this is an old book, I think it's still very valuable as a reference. It probably came out in the late 70s. Holographic Paradigm and Other Paradoxes, edited by Ken Wilber. And it's a collection of essays, one of which is by a physicist called David Bohm. You may have heard of him. He's quite famous, and he introduced this concept called implicate-explicate order, and the way that multidimensionality is sort of enfolded in reality itself, maybe not directly perceivable, but it's there, and you can access it maybe through scientific experiment with, in cloud chambers, but also maybe through meditation as well. So anyway, long story on that one, but yeah, philosophy readings were very important. And of course, Buckminster Fuller, Ideas and Integrities. This is a major book, and his Geometry Synergetics. He has two big books, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Anybody into geometry and wanting to express it graphically, I highly recommend Synergetics Volume 1 and 2. It's kind of a spherical and omni-triangulated geometry. It builds on what Euclidean geometry, which is more orthogonal, meaning cubic, cubes, 90-degree angles. So that was a revelation for me. Okay, I'll leave it right there. I could go on. I don't want to talk solid. It's easy to do it, but your questions unlock a lot of thoughts. So I'm going to put in a lot into it.
I appreciate your words. So in general, this intersection would be this is my favorite question, because I myself have no such ability to hear rhythm and melody in the song, meaning that if the melody is on, I cannot tap into the rhythm of it, you know what I mean? So and you otherwise have an amazing ability to hear all of it and to translate musical sounds into something visual. Can you talk us through this in a way?
Sure, yeah. I got involved with, probably going back to that Gene Youngblood class, hearing about visual music, this form, which was, and it goes back to 1900. There was a major museum exhibition about it, but 20 years ago now, in 2005, and that was a survey of what was called visual music. And it kind of evolves over time. It has its own chronology. A lot of it in the 20th century dealt with film. So the essence of visual music is really kind of representing sonic phenomena. Many people think of it as music, but it doesn't have to be. It could be, abstract noise or whatever, anything on the spectrum of sound. But we could talk about music because it's quite accessible. Music, when you study music, and I guess I had just by chance, since I got into music as a teenager and I took a few classes in college, I learned about the formal technical characteristics of music. And so it came to me at some point, when musicians were reading music, it's amazing when you think about, you think of the staffs. They have this written language that represents sound. It represents pitch, and it represents duration of notes, and it represents meter, the measures. There's different kinds of, and that goes back to mathematics. What links the visual phenomena with the audio phenomena is mathematics and physics and geometry. They both share that same property. That's where they commingle, but they kind of break out in different aspects of the sensorial bandwidth, one audio, one visual. But because they have this a priori link phenomenologically, it's just a natural that humans kind of made this form, oh, I want to represent these notes, and I can represent it in different ways graphically. I can, as I say, as a note raises in pitch, I can have this shape transform in color in sync with it, or I can have the shape change, Or if you get repetition from music, you can have repeating shapes, or you can have patterns that transform. Like music, if you look at the structure of a composition, many times it has a pattern, but then it morphs and then it switches into another section. So you can mirror all these phenomena, which are kind of like basically structural elements in both disciplines, and you can go back and forth. When you talk about visual music, many times people will talk about synesthesia, which is the phenomenon of sort of seeing sound or hearing shapes or hearing colors. And so visual music, when it's really good, kind of evokes that kind of experience, this kind of synesthesia, flipping back, and the interplay of the senses, flipping back and forth. I mean, I don't know. I can talk more about that, but does that give you an idea of how you can, how
Yeah.
you can kind of visualize music? And
So,
go ahead.
what I know is that if you're talking about like Kandinsky, what he experienced was kind of illness. It is regarded as an illness when one sensory thing that you're like touching or seeing always involves another sensory thing that is not happening at the moment, meaning that when he was hearing music, he was seeing the music too. So I guess this is the word that you used to also describe it. However, your creative process is slightly different, if I got it correctly. Is this right?
My creative process, how I sort of my workflow to make
Yeah.
compositions or pieces that utilize some of this phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Um, well, what is interesting, which I found, was um, getting into computer animation and getting into computer editing, like Adobe Premiere. First, it was Final Cut Pro. The whole notion of the timeline, or the whole concept of an interface of the timeline. So you if you have just an audio track, you can follow the histogram along the timeline, and then you can also animate forms in the timeline. Or if you have live action video, that's on the timeline too. So that's how I kind of like started syncing up um, visual elements and visual phenomena, whether they're computer generated or live action, or editing of live action, you know, in relationship to the sonic events on the timeline. So it's a great, basically, it's kind of like this great helper, if you will, in terms of visualizing and actually getting in there and syncing the phenomena. Synchronization between sound and picture is very important, I think, for the form. Another thing that I do is, the original visual music was primarily purely abstract. There was not very little, if ever, any figuration. But I think that it's okay to have figuration in it. You can have any visual thing and any audio thing, because you're intervening with it through in the act of editing or camera work. So I feel like I'm beginning to answer your question, like, how do I go about it? Is there, I mean, if you have a follow-up question, to
Uh,
that or whatever.
yeah. So actually, on this, I was wondering if there is any video that is on your YouTube channel that you want me to showcase right now, so our audience can see it.
Yeah, okay.
I got you out of nowhere, I know, but
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. Well, just for the viewers here and listeners, um, I sent Elena a link to a playlist, YouTube playlist, that is pieces across a 10-year span of time. There's not too many of them. There's 7 of them. I mean, I did many more, of course, but I just plucked out 7 videos that kind of illustrate what I'm doing. You might go back. You know what you could do is jump around, and I can talk a little about these. Maybe go to the first one. Some of them are too long to leave on completely, but this is my latest one.
think, yeah. mm, I think you can hear the audio, right?
Yeah, I can hear the audio just fine. So this is a. I won't. I'll talk after, but we'll let a little of this play. You could pause it now if you want, and I'll say a little bit about what you're seeing here. So most of what was on the screen was AI. Those women, like there's a like kind of an old lady that's walking across that bridge. That's live action, but then using runway uh, Gen Alpha 3, sort of runway Alpha Gen 3, something like that. I was able to go from a still image at the end of that live action clip into a AI generated sequence, and I could 15-second ones and 30-second sequences, and I can tie them together. So, and then I could extend that. So I had that lady kind of look up, and then she kind of morphed into a younger AI generated woman. And I believe she already had sunglasses on, but I asked Runway to have her take off her glasses or something, or put some glasses on. Anyway, so it became this metaphor that I didn't intend. Like the idea of she had these glasses on, and then she puts on another pair of glasses, and this is kind of a kind of a up to the minute version of this metaphor that runs through all my works, starting from the late 70s, of this kind of alternate reality, kind of looking into the world, kind of into the sort of energetic structure of things. Um, so, and AI is a wonderful tool. You know, I think of AI as another extension of the artist's toolkit, just like how computer graphics or computers were to analog media. So anyway, yeah, so it was kind of fun to there's to make this video, and it was my first foray into AI, and which I'm very excited about. I know there's a dark side, and it was like that for digital art. We have to work. I mean, computer technologies, when it came in and changed the world, it's happening again, but in a bigger way, because AI can operate independent of humans in a way that computers, just regular computers, can't. But still, if we can kind of sort of knock on wood, the world's in a very dangerous place right now, as we all know. But if we can keep it together, uh, the humans that want to help other humans flourish and all of that, I think AI could be a great tool for humans to be uh, even more human, if you will, and extend the quality of their life, and extend the lifespan of the planet itself. Uh, but many times artists are the first people to kind of jump in and explore a new tool set. And I think that's what's happening now. I'm kind of looking down at some of my notes. But anyway, I invite people to look at the playlist. Like I say, it spans little selections across a 10-year period. And you can see in practice, some of the things I was talking about. Polyhedra is another important component, and one polyhedra can transform into another. So I utilized that. And then I got involved with VJ, real-time live mix projection for like drum and bass and dubstep. like in 2012 to 2014. And I learned about this VJ tool called VDMX, where you can play things back and you can kind of like morph them in real time and add filters. So I brought that into my studio practice. So I combined the natural properties of transforming polyhedra with this overlay of video effects that can kind of morph them and make them biomorphic. And that lends itself to syncing to the music in a more fluid biomorphic way. So you'll see, when you see these videos, you see that happening. There's a lot there. I feel like I'm just talking your ear off, but this will, anyway, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. So anyway, I'll let you give you a moment to ask another.
Yeah, definitely. Before we jump into another question for
Yeah.
our audience, once again, you can find Victor's YouTube channel and type it in YouTube and check out the whole playlist. And you kind of, I don't know how, but you elaborated on this already. And this was the question that I had in my head since the beginning of this webinar. So I assume, I don't know, but I assume that when you only started practicing computer art back in 80s, you met some critics, or in general, like there was this narrative that it's not art or they are replacing human art whatsoever. Same thing that is happening with AI. So what I want to know is how you got through it, and how, having this deep background in computer art since 80s, you decided that NFTs and AI generated art is something you want to explore. I hope this question makes sense.
Oh yeah, it does. It kind of touches on, it kind of encapsulates some of the ideas I was sort of touching on in a form way. Um, but yeah, you're very right about, and this is what Elena is showing now on the screen is the front page of, or one of the front pages of my website, which is acevedomedia.com. I invite you to check that out too later. And but anyway, yeah, each when you think about the history of computer art, and that's interesting. I say computer art because that's what it was called first. The technology was called computer graphics. It came out of the visualization of mathematical properties that, graphing. Graphing space goes way back to the days of Descartes. And navigation with the explorers, or even the early astronomers. And there's a Sir Isaac Newton. So the seed of graphing the Cartesian coordinate system, it's kind of the XYZ. Those were invented, I don't know, the 1600s or something. So there's this chronology of graphing space, and it's particularly acute when you look at the history of painting. But anyway, it was kind of a natural and then cybernetics emerged, and that was kind of the discipline coming out of mathematics that kind of gave birth to computers themselves. So it was a natural to then apply this sort of number crunching technology, if you will, to graph space, or a diagraphical application, basically through plottings. So anyway, maybe I went too far back, but by the time it got to me in the 80s, I got the tail end of the notion of how do you get access to a computer. You kind of hook up with a scenario that has access to a mainframe, and you can learn the programming language. And in 83, I took a workshop. Actually, the first workshop I took was on a PC with a pioneer called Frank Dietrich, originally from Germany, but he was living in the United States. And he was working with a programming language called ZGrass. And so my first experiences working with computer graphics were algorithmic. And then I took a class the following year, a full-on class with another computer art pioneer, Tony Longzon, who was originally from the UK, and that was like on a VAX 1170. And once again, it was algorithmic approach to making graphics. But at the same time, that was 1984. The Macintosh was landing, right? You had already had the first few years in the 80s of personal computers, and they had little paint systems, and they had some graphics capability. And by the middle 1980s, you had 3D modeling and animation applications on the desktop PC. So, given my background in and level of skill that I had acquired up to then in analog media, I kind of thought I wanted a more direct interface with making pictures. So I gravitated towards 3D modeling and kind of graphic user interface for that. But getting back to your question in terms of people rejecting computer art, yeah, right away, people rejected it. Oh, computers and art, they don't go together. How can you make art with computers? It's the same with AI. That's what's kind of funny. You watch humans, they go through cycles, they do the same thing over and over again. Some of them learn from history, but a lot of them don't. And it's kind of, on some level, what can you do? It's natural. Other ways, other level, it's ridiculous. It's like, and so people, AI is going to get integrated, and people are going to realize, well, how do we live without it? I still have those feelings about Google or Google Maps, driving somewhere I haven't been before, like, or learning about having a question, something out of the blue, um, I won't give an example, but you can think of any question like you just thought, oh, what's the answer? Oh, let me Google it. How did we live without Google, without search engines? Now it's AI level on top of it. So I think humans, once they get used to it, most humans will think it's great. Um, our political issue problems notwithstanding, that's a bigger problem perhaps. Um, but I just, by the time it got to me, meaning by the time I was kind of jumping into the stream, the timeline of digital art, uh, the ecosystem had developed to the point where there was the SIGGRAPH, ACM SIGGRAPH conference and every year, and they had art shows there. And then the Los Angeles SIGGRAPH chapter was very active. So there was a community right there. So I didn't really feel that alone. And everybody was, sort of us against the world mentality. We know computer graphics or computer art is important, and this is the future. I mean, I thought that when I saw in 1980, oh, I no longer aspire to being an oil painter. I want to work with computer art. That is the future. Um, so I was sort of shielded from this sort of animus of, oh, it's not art. I thought it was a matter of time. The thing about it, it's taken way longer than we thought. But we're in a whole nother playing field now. Post blockchain, post NFT. That opened the floodgates for digital art. And I talk about computer art and digital art. It used to be called computer art, and about in the 1990s, it was shifted to digital art. Kind of, I guess, it was felt that that was a more articulate name for the art form. But yeah, digital is now in the marketplace. It's now, there's all these museum shows that are happening. Like, it's just exploding. I'm just glad that I'm still, I'm pretty old relative to a lot of people, but I'm still young enough to maybe participate in some of this excitement that's going on, and this explosion, this revolution, acknowledgement of this history that started in 1950s, early 1950s.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you've been talking, and just out of nowhere, really random thing to share, but I co-founded one company, and we organize digital art exhibitions around the world. And so my partner, he's slightly older, like another generation completely. And whenever we have some exhibition, he starts by saying that he's here to prove that age doesn't matter. So I completely agree with him on this one. And so another question is that um, I met a lot of digital artists and took some interviews with them too. And normally they never share a book. I have some academics who do share some books like you did that inspired them, that were like gave them this basic. But normally all of them were keeping up and learning how to code just by going to YouTube and just like, okay, YouTube, how to like, I don't know, like code a sun on a computer using this software or another. And I know that when you were working with this, you didn't have YouTube and all these basic things. So just like this, I'm going to this part of the importance of actual physical book, and I want to share yours. So I'm putting up on the screen your book, and if you can just tell our audience a little bit about it, and that would be great.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much, Rolena, for putting that up there. And yeah, this is a book I wrote. I published it in November 2022, and there was a small limited edition of hard copy books printed, but it really lives as an ebook or a PDF version. And it's available on Amazon and Apple Books. It's a 400-page book. It's a 43-year career survey of my work from analog media 1977 to 87 and digital media from 83 to 2020. Um, and it has, so it's kind of like a coffee table book in a way. I mean, it'd be on your desktop or your phone or your iPad. Uh, but it's like an art book in that spirit where you can see full page images and kind of go through a chronology from analog media into digital, and then referencing still images into time based. So that's kind of the main core of the book. But there's also, it's called Acevedo in context because it relates to the community in which I was operating that fostered my art actions. Um, so I kind of have this chronology in the back of the book, like the part 3 of the book is a illustrated timeline of important shows that I was in and important events that I was kind of interacting with the community. One of the things to co-reference with one of your previous guests, who's an old friend of mine, Michael J. Masucci at Easy TV. I met him in 1984. He came to my birthday party. I was 30 years old on that day. So we go way back to 84. And he was involved with Easy TV then, and I visited there, and we kind of had this great rapport. And then it kind of over across the decades, in the next 6 years, well, he started showing digital art there. It was one of the few venues in Los Angeles that was friendly to computer art or digital art. So every once in a while we'd have an important show. There was a show called in 1987 Computer Superstars that had Rebecca Allen and this gentleman called Mancho Agora, who's from Spain, and he's still quite active, and some other people that I know that you've heard of. So anyway, he asked me to be involved with a show that he was working with Ale Sigraf and Patrick Prince. Some of you may have heard of Patrick Prince. She's passed away now, but she was an important art historian, one of the first in the world to start collecting digital art, and she knew all the pioneers going back to the 50s. And her archive is housed at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and it's one of the most important collections of computer art in the world. So she was involved as a co-curator with Michael Masucci, and I was also involved. They brought me on to help out with PR promotion. So that's an example of Acevedo in context, how I related to the local the ecosystem, the community around digital art and bringing it forward. So the Art 1990 gave way to Cyberspace Gallery, and the key inception years from 1992 to 93, it was at Easy TV. The directors were Patrick Prince and Michael Masucci, and once again they brought me in to kind of do PR and such, and I was in several of the shows. So that's in my book too. That was an important time, the early 1990s. So yeah, and there's a reading list there. I showed some books earlier, but that was just sort of scratching the surface. I've got extended reading list in the book, and so I invite you guys to check it out. And the version on Amazon is quite accessible because you don't even have to actually read it through a Kindle app. You can put the PDF in a Kindle. And don't quote me on this, but if you can do that, maybe you can just read the PDF standalone. But one last thing I want to say about it: the advantage of the ebook version is it has links to some of the visual music pieces that I talk about in the book. So that's another good quality of that. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Elena. I really appreciate that. It's been around for a while, but I haven't had a big push on it. But I like to let people know it's there.
Yeah, and I also feel like it is a nice thing to have. Like, it may not be a bestseller, but it's always nice to have something you can refer to. Even like when we were just starting our conversation, I was sending you all the links and explaining how to join, and you send me like, here's my link, here's my book, and you can explore more. So it is like extremely handy. And I had also like some speakers who have their books, and I was sitting, and I'm always like every time thinking, I really want to have my book too, you know. So maybe one day, I think it is always nice to have your book, whatever you're trying to convey or showcase there.
Yes,
So yeah, two click to actions from my side.
yeah.
Do check out Victor's book. You go to Amazon and type his surname, which is Acevedo, and you can find it directly. It's ebook on Amazon. Another click to action is you can go to the Omakase Show YouTube and check out the webinar with Michael that Victor referred to. He's also a pioneer and extremely intelligent person and really interesting speaker. So go ahead and do it. And yeah, Victor, I think this is like a final question that I like asking. What are some things you're working on right now, and what are some upcoming projects you're planning to release? So yeah, like future plans.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the next thing I want to do is get deeper into my exploration of AI in the time-based realm. Do more with Runway, and people I had a good friend saying there's a motion graphic AI app called Kling, and I want to check that out. But Runway is quite good. There's a lot there. And my main tool sets are kind of Blender. I'm kind of want to getting deeper into Blender for 3D modeling, but combine that with AI capability. And then also, live action is an important thing. So I like the synthesis. You'll see it throughout my work of figuration and abstract geometry. So I want to continue on that. Each time the tool sets evolve, I think it's an opportunity for me to get deeper and more articulate about this metaphor that I'm trying to bring into the world. So I'm looking forward to that. And then also I have some blockchain activity. We didn't talk so much about that, but when I found out, I had been hearing about the blockchain like maybe as early as 2017 and such, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was coming. And there was this book in 2017 called Artists Rethinking the Blockchain. I didn't read it, but just being aware of the book and thinking of the title, I go, yeah, people are saying it's going to be great for tracking sales. And then the NFT came about and became very much the instrument for being able to buy digital art, on the blockchain. All these technologies came together. So anyway, this is a long answer to say that this is my X channel. I was with for a while. I was selling work with a gallery in Berlin called Expanded Arts, very good gallery. And this is some early work from 1987 that you're seeing here on the screen. This is sort of the first work that really crystallized for me from in my early years. So I actually hope to, in the next month, it's gotten delayed, but to have a show on object, a show exhibition sale for based on that video we looked at earlier called Highway Bridge. So I haven't really worked out the details, but maybe the video will be available as an NFT or a token in 2 parts. and stills from it. These are, in fact, stills from it. So I think I'm breaking it out as stills and also maybe two-part components. And the reason I do two parts, it originally was two separate videos that I put together that work very well together. So that's coming up for me. I'm very excited about that. I like Object. I started on OpenSea with Ethereum, but really most of my activity has been on Object with Tezos. I love the Tezos community. I love Object. My Genesis drop on Object was in May 2023. So, and then, I haven't had massive success in terms of financial, but I have sold. I've sold more than I did in the early days of, pre-blockchain. So, the door is open. So I'm excited about continuing on. Web3, AI, blockchain. Those are kind of the three domains I think that are going to be pathways into the future.
Sounds really exciting. And like, I remember we were backstage, and I told you normally this webinar takes around 30-40 minutes. It never takes an hour, and we've been talking almost for an hour, because you have such an amazing background, and everything you told me was like extremely interesting. And I do hope every upcoming project you will be working on will turn out perfect for you. So yeah, Victor, thank you so much for your time. I guess like our co-founder was right. You are a legend. It is an extreme dedication to this space since 1983, which is like so impressive. I really appreciate your time coming up and replying to all my questions.
You're welcome. You're very welcome, Elena. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you, and share with you and with your audience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And just for the audience, we will have an upcoming episode next week on Monday, with a quite like a person, a speaker would be from a different sphere, from robotics, which I have
Yeah.
no idea, like nothing about, but it should be super exciting. So yeah, do join us on Monday. And Victor, thank you so much once again. And we are staying in touch. Feel free to share everything you're working on so I can keep our community posted.
Okay, will do. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. It'd be great. I love what you're doing, Elena. I think it's really, really great because
Thanks so much.
you bring an interesting array of guests each week. Uh, and you're touching on areas I think that other podcasts are not touching on, almost like this parallel history. You have this great knack of finding people that maybe um, their stories are underrepresented in a way, so or they're more obscure to a more general audience. Some are quite famous, like Krista Kim. I mean, she's a legend as well. I mean,
That's true.
I was amazed by what she was talking about and showing.
Yeah.
That really got my attention. So, hats off to you for bringing these extraordinary programs, each week. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. And yeah, staying in touch.
It will do.